Welcome back, everybody, to the second half of our meeting. Now, the second half of our meeting is where we have usually 2 speakers, so we like to have, even 3, but this evening, only 1. This is a prepared speech. Our speaker this evening is delivering a number 5 speech from the Competent Communicator Manual, Your Body Speaks. His objectives are to use stances, gestures, facial expressions, and eye contact to express his message and achieve his speech's purpose. To make his body language smooth and natural. This is a 10 to 12 minute speech. He delivered this speech last week in Vernon as a test speaker for the Division C speech contest. There were 4 contestants that evaluated his speech for the contest. This evening, he's going to try and incorporate into his presentation some of the feedback that the evaluators gave, or that the evaluators provided for him. Please welcome Rae Stonehouse, Distinguished Toastmaster, with Booze and Canoes, a blast from the past. Booze and Canoes, a blast from the past, Rae Stonehouse.
Have you ever received a letter in the mail, or perhaps an email message, that when you read that message, it immediately took you back to when you were younger, your former days? Well, I did just a few weeks ago, a month and a half ago. It was an email message, and the title said, Booze and Canoes, signed Mike. And I thought, that's really weird. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. Booze and Canoes. I don't know about you, but that was a topic that grabbed my attention. What in the world could a message about booze and canoes possibly have to do with me? Well, I opened that message up out of curiosity. And I read it, and I have to tell you, my initial thoughts wasn't necessarily anger, but I was irritated. Because it didn't come through my personal email, it came through my business. Okanagan Health for Biz, that's my business. And the message said, why would anybody do business with you, with your problems, with booze and canoes? And then I recognized the signature went after. My friend Mike. Nobody else would know this situation. So I obviously knew that this wasn't spam, this was a genuine message. And it immediately took me back more than 40 years ago. Mike and I were friends in high school, 1969. I believe we met in grade 9. And we found out soon that we had several things in common. We were hockey fans. We spent a lot of time outside playing road hockey. That's what you do in Canada. Certainly you do that in Ontario. We played road hockey in the wintertime. And we also spent a lot of our time in the arena. We worked in the equipment room. We gave out sweaters. We worked in the penalty box. We had all different, we were involved with Little NHL in different capacities. So we spent a lot of time in the arena. Some people call it rink rats. And that's what we were. We were rink rats. That was the winter time. But spring, summer, and fall, our passions that we shared was canoeing and wilderness camping. We were passionate about that. We belonged to a club in our school. It was called Outward Bound. It was not the famous Outward Bound Club. It was a name that I guess our school borrowed, and it was an Outward Bound Club. And throughout our high school years, some 4 years, we went together on some more than a dozen canoe trips. Now, Mike and I were partners. We went on canoe trips all through, I always thought it was Northern Ontario that I lived in, but it wasn't Northern Ontario because there's an awful lot of Ontario if you look at the map. So it was Central Ontario, Algonquin Park, and quite a few other areas that were quite wilderness, pristine, really out in the middle of nowhere. And we were on wilderness canoe trips together. Now, how it worked was a canoe. This is our canoe. I was the bowman. The bowman is the person that sits in the front of the canoe. So my role was basically just to paddle. Just to paddle. If I got tired, I'd switch over to the other side. And Mike, who's my partner behind, he was the sternman. Now, the sternman's job is to paddle, of course, at the same time, ideally keep in sync with the person in the front, the bow person. But the stern person has an added responsibility of being the person that steers. So if we wanted to go this way, Mike would steer to the left or steer to the left, steer to the right, and I followed because I was in front of him. That's what it was like when we were on smooth water. We were on so many trips together that I can vaguely remember the names of the places, but there was one trip that stood out, because that was the one we almost died on. Well, more precisely, I almost died on. So let me tell you about that story. We're going down a river, and I don't know if anybody's ever done any canoeing or whitewater rafting. Same idea in a canoe, but you have a little bit more control while you're in a canoe. Now, the stern person still has the job of steering, but the bow person has a very important role. What they have to do is they have to be able to steer past any objects that are in the fast-moving water. And believe me, you are going fast when you're going down the white water. So you put your paddle out this way, turn it this way, put it this way, which would draw you that way. That's what the plan was. We saw ahead of us, quite off ways in the distance, a large area, whether it was a lake or what it was, but it looked really calm. But to get there, we had to go down this long, powerful river, rocks here and there, white water. White water is, in case you're not familiar, the water gets moving very fast because there's usually some kind of a hazard there, whether it's a shoal, the water's picking up speed, or whether it's a rocks picking up, gets faster and faster. So it is very dangerous. But you take these ones a little bit differently. What you have to do, you have to get down on your knees. I don't think I've been down on my knees like this since back when I was in the high school days. So you had to paddle like this. What this did, it gets your center of gravity lower in the canoe, so you're less likely to tip. It also gives you a better plunge, I guess, for lack of other words, to get control into the water. You better control. The plan was we were going to go down shoot the rapids, we were going to go down the fast water, and we were going to stay to the left-hand side. Then once we shot the rapids, we were going to land in the area where the water was calm. That's what the plan was. Now, as often happens, plans don't go according to plan. We started to go down the rapid. We were picking up speed. We were in control of the situation. We were dodging rocks. We were getting faster and faster. And then all of a sudden, a wave, probably about a meter high, back then it would have been 3 feet because 40 years ago, we used to say 3 foot. So a 3 foot high wave came across the bow of the canoe, hitting me on the chest. So what it did was it threw me out of the canoe into the water. The canoe tipped. Now, before I tell you what happened to me, let me tell you what Mike did. Mike, when the canoe flipped over, he was able to stand up. And he was in water only about this deep. So he was able to stand up. He was able to grab the canoe. He pulled the canoe over to the shore, got it out of the way. I didn't know anything about this at all because at the time I had my own problems. When the canoe flipped over and I tried to stand up, there was nothing beneath me to stand up on. There was no bottom. I'm floating with my life jacket. And I'm floating, not only bobbing up and down, trying to tread water just to keep moving, I'm floating very fast. What I realized at that time was I got stuck. Remember the smooth area I told you about? Wasn't smooth at all, because it had this motion here. Anybody recognize this motion? It's called a whirlpool. And I was into a whirlpool. And I was floating around this huge area. And it was a powerful whirlpool. People weren't able to come and rescue me because there was another 10 canoes that were on our trip, so another 20 people. Eventually, probably around my third loop around the lake, and I'm floating, holding on for dear life. But it was about the second attempt with my friends' canoes, fellow students. They came out, and they weren't able to catch me, but what they used was a gaff hook. Now, I don't know if anybody knows what a gaff hook is. Fishermen use it. It's a pole, and it has there's a hook on the end, which they would use to help pull up heavy fish. Well, I guess I was the heavy fish, and they used this gaff pole on me to drag me to shore. So while one person, there was 3 people in the canoe that time, so one person was holding onto me, the big fish, 2 other people paddled for all their life to break the centrifugal force of the whirlpool and get me to shore. And that's where it got really interesting. They got me into shallow water. I was able to get bottom, that part was the good part, and I started walking to shore. And it was all I can do to walk. You see, well, I've got a shirt on here right now for demonstration purpose. That particular day, I was wearing an old jacket, hand-me-down from, I don't even know where I had gotten it from. The inside of it, the liner, was about 1.25 inches of open cell foam. So what had happened, it had probably sucked in maybe 150 pounds, seemed like 150 pounds of water. So when I got on the shore, it was all I could do to crawl out. So what that meant was that if I had not had my life jacket on, while I was floating around in that circle, well, let's face it, you'd be staring at an empty room right now. Because I wouldn't have been here. That really scared me. We went on a good dozen canoe trips. Everything went well. When we graduated, we continued to go on our own canoe trips. We didn't have the teachers with us, so we didn't have to follow rules. We could get up when we wanted to, go to bed when we wanted to. We could party when we wanted to. And that's where the element of the booze came with the canoes. Because back in those days, we were late teenagers. We were willing to be rebels. We were willing to try some things. So we bring some liquor with us just to add a little extra entertainment, strictly medicinal of course, to our canoe trip. And what we used to bring, anybody here ever drink lemon gin? Anybody ever heard of lemon gin? Anybody heard of Tang? Lemon gin and Tang. Because you didn't have to refrigerate Tang. All you had to do was put the crystals in a pot, go down, scoop up some water, and you were able to drink lemon gin and Tang. I can't imagine anything more awful at this point in time. But that's what we would drink. And I guess some of us might have on one occasion drank a little bit more than was expected or was probably wise. I don't recall what happened. I don't recall how I got from point A to point B, but I do remember being lost on a portage. The portage is where you haven't got any water and you have to carry everything over land. It's not fun. I got lost, and I guess they sent out a rescue crew, being my other fellow canoers, looking for me. When they found me, I was on a path, where that path was going, and I'm singing merrily to myself because I'm Tang and lemon gin, and I'm pulling a rope. Where I was going, I don't recall. Why I was doing it, but most important thing in the world right now was getting that rope from point A to point B. What I learned was, I've never touched lemon gin, and I can't even imagine, it's like perfume. I can't imagine it now. I certainly never drink again on a camping trip. So when Mike sent me this letter about booze and canoes, this all came rushing back about this situation. And it's been close to 40 years. Mike and I were friends through high school. After we graduated, as I said, we went on more canoe trips. But gradually, as time passed, which does in many people, we went our separate ways. Mike went off to university to become a civil engineer, I believe. I went to school to become a registered nurse. We drifted away. 1978, my wife and I got married. Mike was our best man for the wedding. We moved to another community after that. He moved to another community. Haven't seen each other since. I think this is one of those cases where the law of attraction comes into play. You see, a couple years ago, and off and on over the last few years, I've searched for Mike through Google, on the internet. I've looked in Facebook, and I've looked through LinkedIn, and I was never able to find him. Yet all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get an email. So I think I set things in place with the universe. The universe will do that for you. Now, I think that maybe I should have entitled this speech, How to Time Travel. How to time travel back into your past. That's what happened with us. We've touched bases. We know, what are you going to talk with somebody? You haven't seen somebody for 4 years. So what's new just doesn't seem to cut it. We've touched base. I'm not too sure where it's going to go from now. In the meantime, I've reached out and I've connected with a couple other fellows that were in my high school class through Facebook. Kind of curious to know where they went. We've touched base on that. So I would suggest that anybody, if you're interested in doing some time travel, it's easily, readily available at your fingertips. Get on the internet, just get out there and touch somebody. Mr. Chairman, Toastmaster.